You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Seattle Public Schools has a new superintendent, and he was supposed to start the job today. I sat down with Ben Shuldiner on Friday to preview his priorities for leading the largest school district in Washington and how he plans to tackle some of its biggest challenges. But just moments after finishing our interview on Friday, things changed. Two teenagers who are believed to be Seattle Public School students were shot and killed at a bus stop in Rainier Valley near both South Shore PK through 8 and Rainier Beach High School. I called Superintendent Shuldiner yesterday. He was in the office with his district team to get his response to the shooting and ask what he knows about what happened on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I can say and need to say is my condolences to the family, to friends, the entire community. This is a tragic and horrible event. We have publicly said that these were two students in the school district. But all of the investigation has to go through the police. We have to make sure that they are able to do their jobs. Our response from a school district is, of course, to support the families and the community. We will be sending mental health professionals to that school, to Rainier Beach, as well as the K-8 school. Our job as a school district when a tragedy like this occurs is to make sure that we're trying to support both the children and the adults that were there, that saw it or are connected in some way. But in terms of the actual investigation, clearly, I'm going to just defer to SPD.
So this was at a corner, of Rainier Avenue South, South Henderson Street. You've got the K through 8 school right there, South Shore K through 8. You've got Rainier Beach High School right there. I mean, my understanding is that there were other students around at this time. Just your reaction on a gut level of what occurred.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, what occurred is terrible. What occurred is horrible. And we have to do a better job as a school district. We have to do a better job as a community in trying to make sure things like this don't happen. As somebody who has been sadly in these situations before, I can tell you that each one is unique and each one is devastating. And, my heart, of course, goes out to the families and the community. But what it also should be is a clarion call for action. We as a district, we as a community need to figure out a way to help to stop things like this occurring. So, yeah, it happened on a street corner. It happened very close to our schools. It happened in the view of many people. These are the things that are just, it's terrible. And we need to figure out a way to help stop this. And I'm certainly open and willing to have conversations with anybody who thinks that they can help with this. And it's terrible.
It does strike me, and this happened in conversation around safety issues in the Central District around Garfield in the past few years, that this has got to be, both the school district, but also the whole city addressing safety issues, gun violence issues. Anything else that you want to add here as, we're going to be talking with you. The folks are going to hear the interview that you and I recorded, just a few minutes before this occurred on Friday. And it's obviously the tone is very different because we didn't have this heavy weight of grief and sadness about this tragedy that has occurred. Is there anything else that you can tell people or anything else you want to add, especially about safety?
Yeah, I mean, even in that initial interview before this tragedy struck, we talked about how important and how imperative it is to create safety and security for our children, for our staff, for our entire community. And I think, if anything, this is yet just a reminder that this must be the focus of the superintendent, of the school district, but also the entire community. We have to work with the city. We have to work with the police. We have to work with our violence interrupters. We have to work with the community. This is all of us, right? There are no sides here. And I think that, if anything, as a school district, I hope we can be a unifier. We believe that it is sacrosanct to protect our children. And so we have to there's no favorites. There's no sides. The only side that we choose is the children. And so we have to work together with everybody to do our absolute best to help stop things like this from occurring. So, I look forward to speaking with the community. I look forward to talking to everybody that's involved, but I also look forward to taking action. This cannot be about hopes and prayers. This has to be about mourning today and acting tomorrow.
You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman, and that is Seattle Public Schools' brand new superintendent, Ben Shuldiner. We spoke again on Sunday after the tragic shooting deaths of two teenagers, which happened on Friday near Rainier Beach High School. Now I want to turn to the original full interview that the superintendent and I recorded on Friday as he was preparing to move from Lansing, Michigan to his new home, Seattle. So you have an experience as a superintendent in Lansing, and then before that, and people might hear it in your voice, New York.
Sure. Yes.
New York City Board of Education. You taught education leadership at Hunter College, and you founded a high school in Brooklyn. Why education? What draws you to education?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It might sound trite, but if there is a meaning to life, and I don't know if there is, but if there is one, I would really like to believe that it's to help as many people as you can on this very brief time you have on the planet. And I can't think of a better way to do that is through education. And I come through it very much through my family. My mother was an English teacher. My father taught math before he ended up working in public housing. My grandma ran a nursery school in the Bronx. My grandfather ran an education rehabilitation center in New York. And ironically, even my name, Shuldiner, means school worker or school servant. So Shul means school and dinner means servant. So I guess somewhere back in the day, the Shuldiners worked in schools. So, it's wonderful. And I also love it, right? I mean, it's not just about doing right, but I also love being in schools. I love education. I loved my time in the classroom as a principal, as a professor. And I really, really love being a superintendent because you can help impact so many people, the children, the staff, the educators, the families, and an entire city.
So I want to get to your priorities for the new position with Seattle Public Schools. But just first off, because this has been in the headlines so much recently, it's on top of mind for everybody. Several schools in the district went into shelter-in-place protocols recently when there were unconfirmed reports of ICE and immigration enforcement operating nearby. Yeah. How do you plan to navigate this time right now, especially, with families, students, and staff feeling on edge? What's your way forward as the leader of the district when it comes to ICE and immigration enforcement?
I mean, the first thing I want to say is to the families, we understand your anxiety. We understand your fear. This is a lot. It is something that we have not dealt with in America in a long time in terms of this just overriding fear and anxiety. And so I want anybody listening to this to know that I hear you, I understand, and we're going to do our absolute best to try to make sure that everybody is as safe as possible. What a lot of people might not know is Lansing actually is a huge hub for refugee and immigration. And in fact, at one point had 1% of all the nation's refugees were coming to Lansing. So what we've done here is we have a really, really good relationship with a lot of our immigrant rights. We have a very good relationship with the police, very good relationship with the sheriffs. So all of us are together knowing that we're here to protect our children and our families. And so, what you saw by the schools going into lockdown secure is it was fear. Right? It was like, oh my God, we're getting these rumors. What do we do? And I think the district just has to do a better job with professional development, really making sure that principals have all the tools at their disposal, that the district has a very thought out plan. In Lansing, we even had all the principals come to an office, and we had lawyers there, we had immigration rights folks, and we actually played through almost like it was a skit. What happens if? Here's what you can say. The law is pretty clear that a judicial warrant is the one thing that can actually bring somebody on campus and act. But how many principals know the difference between a judicial warrant and administrative warrant? So we actually showed pictures. This is what a judicial warrant looks, so there's a lot of things that we can do as a district to make sure that our families, our staff, the whole community kind of knows how to handle it. But the one thing I will also say is by far the safest place for children is in school. And the reason why is that not only do we have our own lawyers and we have secure vestibules and we have all sorts of safety and security, but as of today, there has not been a single report of ICE agents coming into school buildings to serve warrants, to do anything like that. Now, that's different than bus stops, that's different than in the community, but I want the families to really understand that the safest place for your children is the actual school building.
Seattle Public Schools is facing just a really big budget gap, $87 million. You've said that there are some redundancies that you've identified, and you want to build a more efficient district. What kind of redundancies are you talking about? Are you thinking about a plan for how this district can get back on good fiscal footing?
Sure. So you're right. We're in the hole, 87 million, 100 million. There's a lot of different ways of looking at the data, but what we know is we're in the hole and we need to figure out some very thoughtful ways of saving money. And so the redundancies that I've seen is if you look at the org chart, it's all over the place. And there's different roles and responsibilities that are in multiple different departments. So we've got to figure out, well, should they all be spread out, or maybe there's some people that are doing the same job. Now, the nice thing about a large district that has about 9,000 employees is people do retire and people do go other places. My hope is not to do wholesale firings or layoffs. What it is when we do have vacancies, can we figure out we may not need to replace, or maybe there's other ways to get funding. A lot of times what districts do is if they're kind of siloed, they don't understand that maybe this money can be grant money and that's not taken away from the fund balance, right? So, and anybody from Seattle knows there's like all these different levies and there's all these different taxes and everything is kind of confusing. And so when you're looking at a full school district budget of 1.35 billion, is that's not all general funds. And so sometimes what you can do is if you can move money to grants, that actually will free up the general fund, which is where we are, in the hole. So look, it's a very large district. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of wonderful people, but there's also a lot of positions. Some of which have vacancies now, some of which will have retirements, and there's ways that I think we can do. And then there's also things like transportation. We're spending a lot of money on transportation. We're spending a lot of money on special education. We're spending a lot of money on contracts outside of our teachers. And so do we really need all of that? Is there maybe some thoughtful ways of saving money and actually increasing the way that we can support children? So again, it's going to take me some time to look at it. I've already kind of looked line by line. I meet with the CFO, the assistant superintendent of budget and finance every week already, even though I'm not the superintendent until Monday. And look, we're going to do our best to always put the children first, make these decisions. But you can imagine how a district of this size has these silos where sometimes you're spending the same money on the same thing in different departments. And if we bring everybody together, we can save quite a bit of money.
Just maybe 18 months ago or so, the conversation was about closing schools in Seattle. And I think that that's still something that a lot of people are thinking about a lot. The idea was almost 24 schools would end up being closed. If redundancies are not enough to fix the budget, is that something you would revisit?
Of course, everything's on the table. I would hope that the wonderful people of Seattle don't want to bring in a superintendent and be like, well, you could do your job except for looking at all these other things, right? And so, I don't want to say today, oh, yes, we're going to do, shut down a bunch of schools. No, but everything has to be on the table. And, when I look at the physical plants of a lot of these buildings, I don't know if I really want kids in those buildings, right? You've got some 100-year-old buildings, you've got some other stuff, and then you have these brand new cathedrals to education. Why wouldn't we want to figure out what's best for kids in terms of getting them into the best environment, the best learning, the best resources? So look, everything is on the table, and I would be a terrible superintendent if I didn't say everything was on the table. But what I can say to the community is that these kinds of decisions are not going to be made in a vacuum. They're not going to be made without, talking to the community, talking to parents, talking to kids, and also having a plan. I think one of the concerns that I heard most often about the school closures was it was like, well, here's a list of schools. Now what? I would never do that, right? Like that's crazy. So, in Lansing, we shut down 4 schools in 2 years, and the community was part of it. And in fact, when we had a press conference announcing it, the first person to speak was a parent because he said, "This is best for my children." Because I was part of the conversation. We took schools and we merged them. They were close by. One had a building that had central air and was relatively new. Another one was a building that didn't have a great roof and didn't have air conditioning. And they were so close to each other that just merging them was great. And I really like K-8s. I think there's ways to create more K-8s. Why do I love it, K-8s? Because parents love K-8s. If you've got a first grader, a third grader, and a sixth grader, it's a lot nicer to bring all of them to one school than to bring them to 3 different schools. So I think there's a lot of different things we can do. Let's see. I get there on Monday.
One of the things that parents might be looking at when they think about choosing, if they can, between public school and other options is something like world languages. And we asked our listenership for questions for you. And a teacher at West Seattle High School, Megan, wrote in. She is a French teacher, she says. And here's her question for you. We have been without any district support or leadership in world languages for many years. No professional development, no collaboration, no sharing. What can you do to provide leadership and support for world languages in the district, especially considering that world languages is now part of the Core 24, designed for all graduates to be college ready, and in light of the continued importance of cross-cultural and linguistic understanding? So you can tell Megan works in the district because she knows the lingo.
No, I love it. I love it.
So what's your response, and especially, about like spending priorities on programs like this?
Sure. Well, first of all, Megan, thank you for the question. And I think as the word gets out, please email me personally. I've been already talking about world languages, about Japanese programs, actually, because there was some conversation at a school about that. So look, a superintendent needs to be clear about priorities. And for me, the priorities are creating the best schools that we can for our children. And that is, of course, English and math and history and science, but that has to include arts, music, world languages. That's what makes education whole. That's what makes education interesting. And that's what makes our students full and vibrant, citizens of the world. And so what we can do is, as a district, we need to make sure that we have support for those things. Now, I will say, I appreciate the question saying we don't have any, we're not getting anything. When I look at the org chart, I see all sorts of people whose job is to support curriculum and professional development. So I think the questions I'm going to have is, well, who's supposed to be doing this? Because again, when I look at how many people are supporting this district, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people in curriculum. There's a lot of people in that. And so what I think we need to do is make sure what are we focusing on? What's our mission and vision? And if we include world language in that, just like we should include art and music and physical education and sports. And, there's so many things that we need and we know make a great and robust school district. And it's more important for us to support the people in the classroom than for us to be supporting the people in central office. So, I really look forward to looking into that and kind of district-wide, but certainly as a superintendent who cares deeply about kind of the whole child and a holistic way of thinking of education, I really applaud you for being a world language teacher and for asking me about how we're going to support you.
I'm talking with Ben Shuldiner, the new superintendent for Seattle Public Schools. We sat down on Friday because he was still packing up his office in Lansing, Michigan, and he's starting today, Monday, as the new superintendent in Seattle. He was too busy on his first day of work, to do an interview. So we had to talk while he was still moving. Ben, so the big topic for parents and educators, this is something that really shook the district a couple of years ago in the 2023-24 school year. Safety, especially on campuses like Garfield High School, there was just a really tragic and horrific loss of life, a shooting of Amar Murphy Payne, a student on in the parking lot outside of Garfield High School. That started a whole conversation about school resource officers coming back to some of these campuses. In October, the Seattle School Board voted to not bring back its school engagement officer program to Garfield. That would have brought an armed Seattle police officer to campus. What is your commitment to student safety? And do you agree with the board's decision to not bring back an armed police officer to campus?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing that as a superintendent is safety and security is paramount. It's pretty hard to learn if you're not safe and secure. And that goes for the adults as well as the children and the families, right? And so my commitment is to try to make the district as safe as we possibly can. Now, there's a lot of ways of doing that. Sadly, when I got to Lansing, it, I think, was the 13th most dangerous city in America, if you looked at murder rates at that time. And we worked with the community. We worked very, very closely about how can we deal with some of those issues. And now, 5 years later, our schools are incredibly safe. And so what you have to do is think critically around gold standard safety and security things. Do you have single points of entry? Do you have cameras? Do you have fences? Do you have film on the windows that is bullet resistance? There's a conversation about metal detectors. You know, a lot of times when you talk to families and kids, they want that, because they know that they'll feel safe. And it's not about thinking that our kids or criminalizing our kids. It's the opposite. You know what rich people have? They get to go through metal detectors so they're safe. Every time I go to a sporting event, every time I go to a concert, every time I go anywhere, you do that because you want to make the folks feel safe when they go in. And so, you know, in Lansing, we have metal detectors at all of our high schools, and the community has been overwhelmingly supportive. You talk to kids, they're like, yeah, I feel much safer now. Because I know that going into my building, you know, I know that nobody's bringing anything in. And yeah, I mean, my heart goes out to the family of the child that was killed on the parking lot. But also the year before, I think there was a child actually killed in a school. I mean, that's unacceptable. And so we've got to be really thoughtful about what's going on to all of our families that we want to make sure are safe and secure. So, you know, you ask about SROs. You know, typically, a school district should have an incredibly strong relationship with the police department, mainly because on any given school day, 50,000 kids plus another kind of 10,000 adults are in the schools. The Seattle city has what, about 800,000 kids. So you're talking about like 6 to 7% of the entire city are in our schools. So the police, they know that they're there to protect and support us. But in terms of having an armed police officer in a school building, there's not necessarily as much of a need for that, because if you need them, you call them and they come, and you should have that relationship. But what school districts do need to have is public safety officers, people that typically work for the district, because there's something really more important, more kind of powerful, where if you have a school employee who knows the children, who also happens to be the football coach or the math tutor or whatever, that's a different relationship. And so in Lansing, again, we have public safety officers who work for the district. They're MCOL certified. They don't carry weapons and don't have power of arrest, but they are safety officers that go through a lot of training. But then we also give our own training to them around education and working with schools. So we have a wonderful relationship with LPD, Lansing Police Department, and I look forward to having a wonderful relationship with SPD. I know they care about our children, but when we think about what happens in a school, our job, the school district's job, is to make sure that the school itself is safe and protected, and we should be doing that. Because the other issue too is if you have public safety officers that work for the district, you can kind of work with them. What do? They're going to listen to the principal. They're going to listen. A police department, police officer, they work for the police department. That's their job. They have their own rules and responsibilities. It's very different than the way schools work. So I look forward to having a wonderful, robust relationship with SPD. But in terms of the schools, we, the district, we need to take care of them first, but always make sure that if we need SPD, they're going to come because we're part of this community.
So it sounds like you are interested in revisiting that issue, and whether they're armed or not is kind of the question.
No, so
what do you think?
So to be very clear,
yeah.
SROs are police officers who are police department employees. That is very different, right? Because what I'm talking about is people who work for the school district who are not police. Very, very different. Now, again, we're going to call them if we need them, right? And we should, right? Something goes down and we call them on. But no, what I truly believe in first and foremost, and supporting what the board is saying is we have to have our own people to make sure that the schools themselves are safe. But we need to make sure that we've got a relationship with the police department that if we need them, they're going to come. And they need to feel also supported by us that they are a partner and that they're not something else.
Got it. And just making a note, as you rightly pointed out, 2 years before, Amar Murphy-Payne was shot and killed in the parking lot at Garfield. Ebenezer Hale was shot and killed at Ingram High School in North Seattle, 17-year-old student. Before we wrap up here, phones in classrooms, phones in schools, it's something that is incredibly, on parents' minds, on adults' minds too. I mean, I wish somebody would ban my phone from my hand at all times during the day. But there were some new guidelines floated last year for SBS that would have added new restrictions for students based on grade level. These are expected to go into effect in the 26-27 school year. What do you think about phones in schools, how the district can approach that?
Well, look, I think anybody who has a cell phone knows they're totally addictive. And it's pretty hard to, listen to calculus if you also are watching Instagram. So I think that, school districts should do a really good job in recognizing that having this phone be put away during class is pretty important. So in Lansing, for K-8, we have our policy, which is off and away all day, right? Put it away, shut it off. And, we do know that there's safety and security issues. We would like our children to have cell phones on the way to school, on the way home, right? Parents care very deeply about that. But having a phone during third period, you don't need it, right? And then in high school, I've seen this, and we do this in Lansing. It has to be away for the class, but we do allow it during lunch and during passing period, and certainly after school, sports, things like that. But, I look forward to hearing what the government of Washington's, I got to follow them, right? If they make a law, we're going to follow it. But, I think what we have to always think about is it is a tool. You can use it to do good, but it's so overwhelmingly hard to keep focus on class if you've got that thing in your hand that I look forward to finding ways to put it aside, making sure kids don't use it so that they're not distracted. But I also do concern, I understand the family's concern. It says, well, I need my kid to have a phone on the way home or on the way to school. And I get that. In this modern age, having that is important, but we as a district have to make sure that the phones are not causing disruptions or just getting kids away from engaging in classrooms.
Okay, final question. Have you bought your Seahawks gear yet? I don't know if you've heard, but we are in a pretty big game this weekend. Do you have a jersey currently?
I don't, although I've been told that there are T-shirts and jerseys that seem to be showing up in my office. And so I appreciate that. But I will say, I know this is a radio show, but this was one of the presents that was given to me. Very
nice Mariners hat. I'm just going to point out. And it's the classic, the teal and navy, which is my hat preference from like the Griffey, 1995 Refuse to Lose era. So it's a good taste, whoever bought that one.
I appreciate that. Well, but I will say, and I want the entire community to know this, I'm always going to be transparent. I'm always going to be truthful and honest. I am a Jets fan, which is painful. It's painful to admit,
but also brave to admit. Also brave.
That shows you how loyal I am as a human being. And so I just want you to know I can root for the Seahawks because A, your quarterback was a Jet, and B, they're not in the AFC. So that's okay. But I will be a Jets fan all my life. Sadly, I will be a Jets fan all my life.
Okay, our quarterback was also a 49er and a Viking. So I'm just saying, Jets can claim him, but come on now.
We take ownership. Give us something. We're terrible.
Yeah, that's true. Well, thank you so much for Sam Darnold. Ben Shuldiner, new superintendent of Seattle Public Schools. He starts today. We taped on Friday because, first day of work is a busy day. Ben, it's really been great to chat with you, and I hope we can keep the conversation going.
Please, I'd love it. Please, let's do this often.
And you're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. As we noted earlier in this interview, we taped before the news of the two teenagers shot in the Rainier Valley came out on Friday. At the top of that interview, if you want to go ahead and listen to the podcast, Ben Shuldiner reacts to that tragic shooting when we connected over the weekend. Again, the tone certainly changes in the wake of what happened outside of Rainier High School, and we are still waiting for final confirmation on the identity of those victims and also details of what Seattle police, say may have happened here. No arrests, no suspects right now in that case. Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.